Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The familiar scent of metal and oil clung to Silas Merrick's calloused hands as he tightened the last bolt on Ava's bike. Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the garage windows, casting long strips of gold across the concrete floor. His 7-year-old daughter sat on an overturned milk crate beside him, her legs swinging rhythmically. "Will it be faster now, Dad?" Ava asked, her dark eyes following his movements with careful attention. Silas set the wrench down and wiped his hands on a rag. "Not faster, safer." These brakes were worn down. He spun the wheel, testing its movement. Satisfied, he looked at Ava. Her face held that serious expression that always made her seem older than her years, the one that reminded him of himself. "Want to take it for a test ride?" he asked. Ava nodded eagerly. Silas helped her wheel the bike out to the driveway. The late April air carried the scent of blooming flowers from the neighbor's garden. "Remember what I taught you about using both brakes together?" Silas said, watching her pedal down the driveway. Front and back at the same time, Ava called back, demonstrating a perfect stop at the end of the driveway. As Ava circled back up toward him, he caught a glimpse of Leona through the living room window, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. She was sitting on the couch with a book open in her lap, but he could see the blue glow of her phone illuminating her face. "Always on that phone lately." "Dad!" Ava's voice pulled him back. "Can we still go hiking next weekend?" Silas nodded, ruffling her hair. "I promised, didn't I? Freeman Creek Trail, just like we planned." They spent another hour outside, Silas teaching Ava how to oil her bike chain, her small hands carefully mimicking his movements, her brow furrowed in concentration. These were the moments he lived for now, the quiet spaces of connection that seemed increasingly rare in his home. Later, as darkness fell, Silas moved through the house with the restless energy that had become his constant companion. Ava was already asleep, her night light casting star patterns across her ceiling. Leona had gone to take a bath, leaving her phone on the kitchen counter. He hadn't planned to look. Silas wasn't that type of husband, had never been the jealous, prying kind. But the constant notifications, the way she guarded the device, the late-night texting that illuminated their bedroom at odd hours, it had all planted a seed of suspicion he couldn't ignore. When the phone buzzed for the 5th time in as many minutes, he glanced down. A name appeared on the screen. "Nico." The preview showed just enough. "Can't wait to feel you again tomorrow when he's at." Silas felt his stomach knot. He picked up the phone, entered the passcode he wasn't supposed to know, and scrolled through messages that confirmed his worst suspicions. Explicit texts detailing encounters during his work trips, complaints about him, plans for their next meeting. Not just a one-time mistake. Months of betrayal. Possibly longer. He set the phone down exactly as he'd found it and walked upstairs to their bedroom. Opening the closet door, he found what he was looking for almost immediately, a black hoodie. Too large to be Leona's, too small to be his. He'd never seen it before. Bringing it to his face, he caught the scent of unfamiliar cologne. Silas didn't slam doors, didn't throw things, didn't even confront Leona when she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping on the carpet. Instead, he packed a small overnight bag for himself and one for Ava. He woke his daughter gently, telling her they were having a special sleepover at a hotel with a pool. "Is Mom coming?" Ava asked sleepily as he helped her into her coat. "Not this time," he answered, keeping his voice level despite the storm raging inside him. Leona appeared in the hallway as they were leaving, her hair still wet. "Where are you going?" "It's almost 10. "Out," Silas replied. "Don't wait up." As he drove through the quiet streets, Ava fell back asleep in her booster seat. Silas glanced at her in the rearview mirror, her small face peaceful in sleep, unaware of how her world was about to change. "I've got you," he whispered. "No matter what happens, I've got you." The next morning, while Ava splashed in the hotel pool, Silas made 2 calls. First to his boss for an emergency personal day, then to Mira Tanis, the best family lawyer in the county.by afternoon. Separation papers were being drafted. The conference room at Tanis Legal had windows overlooking downtown, but Silas barely registered the view. 3 days had passed since he'd left the house. 3 days of Leona's increasingly frantic calls and texts, alternating between anger and tearful pleas for him to talk things out. "She can't understand why you won't speak to her," Mira said, reviewing her notes. The lawyer's sharp features suited her reputation as the toughest divorce attorney in the county. "Generally, I advise clients to maintain some communication, but in this case, there's nothing to say," Silas replied. His voice remained steady, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. "I have what I need to know." As Silas recounted the patterns of behavior he'd noticed over the past year, his mind drifted to earlier times, to the woman he'd married 15 years ago when they were both barely out of college. He remembered Leona in the early days, her vibrant laugh, how she'd pull him impulsively into the middle of parties to dance. Her spontaneity had balanced his methodical nature. Her need for attention and validation had seemed harmless, then endearing. Even the memory shifted to 3 years ago, when things had begun to change. Leona had started a new administrative job at a local gym. Late nights became common. Her explanations grew increasingly elaborate, defensive. He recalled one particular night when he'd found her crying in the bathroom. "What's wrong?" he'd asked, concern overriding his frustration with her recent behavior. "Nothing," she'd insisted. "It's just, sometimes I feel like you don't see me anymore. Like you're just going through the motions." He'd apologized then, taken the blame, tried harder, but the harder he tried, the more fault she found. Nothing was ever enough. The gaslighting had been so subtle he hadn't recognized it as such until now, looking back with clear eyes. "Silas," Myra's voice pulled him back to the present. "I asked about custody arrangements." "Full custody," he said without hesitation. "I want Ava with me." Myra's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's difficult to achieve, even with evidence of infidelity. Courts tend to favor joint arrangements." "I know my wife," Silas said, his jaw tightening. "She won't let this go easily. She'll try to use Ava to hurt me." As if summoned by his words, Silas's phone lit up with a text notification. "Leona again. I've spoken to a lawyer. Either you talk to me, or I'll take Ava. You know I can be very convincing." He showed the message to Mira, whose expression hardened. "Document everything," she advised. "Every threat, every inconsistency. And prepare yourself. This could get ugly." That evening, Silas and Ava moved into a small apartment provided by Cohen Maddox, his oldest friend. The history teacher lived in a converted Victorian with a separate garden apartment he occasionally rented out. Now it became their sanctuary. "She's already trying to twist things," Silas told Cohen as they sat on the small porch after Ava had gone to bed. "Telling people I've had some kind of breakdown, that I'm paranoid." Cohen, broad-shouldered with the watchful eyes of someone who'd seen combat, took a long drink from his beer. The two had known each other since elementary school, through Silas's parents' divorce, through Cohen's military service, and subsequent PTSD. There was nothing pretty about their friendship, but it was unbreakable. "You need to understand something," Cohen said finally. "Leona's the type to burn everything down rather than admit fault. She'll play every dirty trick in the book." "Let her try," Silas replied, his voice hardening. "She drew first blood. I don't forgive." 2 days later, Leona filed for emergency full custody, claiming Silas was mentally unstable and had kidnapped their daughter. The petition described him as emotionally manipulative, increasingly paranoid, and attempting to alienate the child from her mother. That night, when Ava asked why they weren't going home, Silas sat beside her on the futon that served as her bed. "Sometimes," he explained, choosing his words carefully, "grown-ups need time apart to figure things out. Mom and I are having a disagreement, so we're staying here for a while." Ava looked at him with those perceptive eyes. "Is it because Mom is always angry at you?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "She says mean things when you're not there," Ava whispered. "She tells me not to be quiet like you, that we have more fun without you being so boring." Silas felt a cold rush of anger, but kept his expression neutral. "You know you can always tell me anything, right? Even if it's hard to say." Ava nodded solemnly. "Mom says I shouldn't tell you things, that it makes you mad." "I'm never mad at you," Silas assured her, pulling her close. "Never. I just want you to be honest, always." As he held his daughter, Silas made a silent promise. He would not let Leona use Ava as a weapon in this war, no matter what it took. The county courthouse loomed over them, its limestone facade bleached white in the morning sun. Silas adjusted his tie, feeling constricted in the suit he rarely wore outside of weddings and funerals. Beside him, Mira walked with the confidence of someone entering her natural habitat. In the hallway outside courtroom C, Silas spotted Leona immediately. Gone were her usual stylish clothes and bull makeup. Instead, she wore a conservative navy dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a modest style, her makeup minimal. She looked like a PBS documentary host, not the woman who danced on tables at their neighborhood block party last summer. Beside her stood a tall man with a carefully groomed beard. Her attorney, presumably. But it was the third person in their group that made Silas's jaw tighten. Nico Valles, dressed in a suit that strained across his muscular chest, standing too close to Leona to be just a supportive friend. The audacity of it burned through Silas's practiced calm. "That's him," Mira asked, following his gaze. "That's him," Silas confirmed. Before Silas could respond, Leona noticed them. She whispered something to her attorney, then approached, leaving Nico behind. "Silas," she said, her voice pitched to carry just enough for nearby people to hear. "Please, can we talk privately before this goes any further? For Ava's sake." Her eyes were wide, appearing tearful and vulnerable, an expression he'd seen countless times when she wanted something. Once it had moved him. Now he saw through it to the calculation beneath. "Any communication can go through our attorneys," he replied evenly. "This isn't you," she said, reaching for his arm. "I know you're hurt, but this coldness, taking Ava like that, you're scaring me, Silas." He stepped back from her touch. "We're done here." Inside the courtroom, Silas felt a strange sense of calm descend over him. This was now a problem to solve, an opponent to defeat. The emotional turmoil receded, replaced by cold determination. The emergency custody hearing began with Judge Halden Price entering the courtroom. The judge was a tall man with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His reputation for fairness was matched only by his intolerance for dishonesty that Leona's attorney presented first, painting a picture of Silas as controlling and emotionally unavailable. He described how Silas had abducted their daughter without explanation, causing Leona extreme distress and concern for the child's well-being. Leona took the stand, her performance flawless, the concerned mother, bewildered by her husband's sudden erratic behavior. When Mira cross-examined Leona, she was surgical. "Mrs. Merrick, are you currently involved in a romantic relationship with another man?" Leona hesitated, her composure flickering. "I have a friend who's been supportive during this difficult time." "A friend," Mira repeated. "Would this friend happen to be Nico Valles, the owner of Flex Fitness, where you work?" "We're colleagues," Leona admitted reluctantly. "And is it standard practice for colleagues to exchange explicit text messages detailing sexual encounters that occurred while your husband was traveling for work?" A murmur ran through the courtroom. Leona's attorney objected, claiming irrelevance, but Judge Price overruled him. "The character and conduct of both parents is absolutely relevant in custody determinations," the judge stated firmly. "The witness will answer." Leona's facade cracked. "That's private. He had no right to go through my phone. So you don't deny the existence of these messages?" Mira pressed. "This isn't about me." Leona snapped, her carefully constructed image slipping. "This is about Silas taking our daughter and refusing to communicate." When it was Silas's turn to testify, he spoke plainly about discovering the affair, about his decision to remove Ava from a volatile situation, about his attempts to shield her from the conflict. As the testimonies concluded, Judge Price indicated he would hear closing arguments after a brief recess. The temporary order would follow. In the hallway, Silas noticed Ava sitting with a court-appointed child advocate. His heart clenched at the sight of his daughter in this cold, formal environment. She looked small and solemn in her blue dress, the one she'd picked out herself this morning, insisting it was her serious dress. When she spotted him, her face brightened momentarily before settling back into that watchful expression she'd worn more frequently lately. She whispered something to the advocate, who nodded and brought her over to Silas. "Dad," she said quietly, "do I have to talk to the judge?" Silas knelt to her level. "Not unless you want to. The judge just wants to make sure you're okay, while Mom and I figure things out." Ava bit her lip, then reached into the pocket of her dress. "I want to show him something." She pulled out her small pink digital camera, a birthday gift from Cohen. The one she'd been carrying everywhere lately, documenting birds and interesting bugs and daily observations in a way that made Silas quietly proud. "What is it?" he asked gently. "Something important," she replied with that serious expression. "Something I recorded by accident." When the court reconvened, an unexpected interruption occurred. Ava approached the bench directly, the child advocate hurrying after her. "Your Honor," the advocate called, "the child wishes to speak with you." Judge Price, known for his formality, softened visibly. "Approach, young lady." Ava walked to the bench with surprising confidence for a 7-year-old. She held out her small pink camera. "I have something you should see," she said clearly. "It's about my mom." The judge glanced at both legal teams, then nodded. "I'll review this in my chambers." "Your Honor," Mira interjected, rising to her feet, "whatever this evidence is, we request it be entered into the official record." Judge Price considered this. "I'll determine its relevance and admissibility after viewing it." Court is in recess for 30 minutes. As the judge left with Ava's camera, Silas caught a glimpse of Leona's face. The color had drained from her cheeks, her eyes wide with something that looked remarkably like fear. When Judge Price finally returned, his expression had hardened. The court fell silent as he took his seat, Ava's pink camera placed carefully on the bench before him. "The court has reviewed evidence presented by the minor child," he began, his voice grave. "I find it both relevant and admissible. The clerk will enter this digital recording as Exhibit C." A court technician connected the camera to a monitor visible to the gallery. The setting was familiar, the living room of their home. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 3 days before Silas had discovered the affair, that Leona's voice came through clearly, raised in anger. The camera shakily panned to show her pacing, a glass of wine in hand. Her movements were unsteady, her speech slightly slurred. "Your father thinks he's so perfect," she was saying, her voice dripping with contempt. "Mr. Always right with his rules and his schedules. Mom, can we just watch the movie?" Ava's small voice asked from behind the camera. "No, you need to understand this," Leona continued, taking another drink. "Your dad is a loser who'll lose everything. He thinks he's so smart, but he doesn't see what's coming." Then came the moment that made the courtroom collectively hold its breath. A male voice called from another room, recognizably Nico's. "Babe, forget it. Kid doesn't need to hear this crap. She needs to know her father isn't some saint," Leona called back, her voice rising. Nico entered the frame, his expression annoyed. He glanced at Ava, but seemed not to notice the camera. "Just tell him you're taking her," he said, lowering his voice but still audible. "Just say he hit you. It'll be done faster. No judge will give him custody." "I can't just," Leona began. "Sure you can," Nico cut in. "It's your word against his. Who do you think they'll believe? The mom or the guy who works all the time?" When the video ended, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Silas felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. He'd known Leona was capable of manipulation, but this level of calculated malice planning to falsely accuse him of abuse struck him like a physical blow. Judge Price broke the silence, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of barely contained anger. "In light of this evidence, the court is ordering an immediate investigation by Child Protective Services. Pending the results of that investigation, Mrs. Merrick's visitation with a minor child will be supervised only." He turned his steely gaze directly to Leona. "I want to be absolutely clear. This court views attempted manipulation of custody proceedings through false allegations with the utmost severity. Had such accusations been formally made, the consequences would include potential criminal charges for perjury." Leona's attorney rose, visibly shaken. "Your Honor, my client was under duress in that video, clearly being influenced by Mr. Valles. She never actually made any false accusations." "Counsel," Judge Price interrupted. I suggest you advise your client of her Fifth Amendment rights before she says anything further. This court takes a very dim view of adults who use children as pawns in their personal disputes. He turned to Silas. Mr. Merrick, the court grants you temporary physical custody of your daughter, with Mrs. Merrick allowed supervised visitation twice weekly until the full custody hearing, which I am scheduling on an expedited basis for 3 weeks from today. Outside the courtroom, as Mira discussed the next steps, Silas caught sight of Ava waiting with the child advocate. He walked over and knelt beside her. You did a brave thing in there, he said softly. But I need you to know something important. What happened between Mom and me, that's not your responsibility to fix. Ava looked at him with those old soul eyes. I just wanted the judge to know the truth. Mom tells lies about you. Silas hugged her close, his throat tight with emotion. I know, sweetheart. I know. Over Ava's shoulder, he saw Leona watching them, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly across the hallway. In that moment, Silas knew with absolute certainty that whatever war had begun today was far from over. Leona's hand shook as she fumbled with her house key, twice missing the lock before Nico impatiently took the keys from her. Inside, Leona moved directly to the liquor cabinet, pouring bourbon into a glass with trembling fingers. How the hell did she record that? Nico demanded, pacing the kitchen. That little brat was spying on us. Don't call her that. Leona snapped, the maternal instinct briefly overriding her panic. She's 7. She doesn't understand what she did. She understood enough to hand it to the judge. Nico countered, stepping closer, looming over her. Your kid just destroyed our case. The sharp crack of Nico's palm against her cheek silenced her. The blow wasn't hard enough to leave a mark, but the shock of it froze her in place, the glass slipping from her fingers to shatter on the floor. You stupid woman, Nico hissed, his face inches from hers. You think crying to a therapist fixes this? They have us on video plotting false abuse claims. Video. The front door opened before she could respond. Gloria Vess entered without knocking, her impeccably styled appearance at odds with the chaos in the kitchen. At 62, Leona's mother maintained the sharp elegance of the former beauty queen she was, her disdain for the world carefully concealed behind designer clothes and surgical enhancements. Well, Gloria said, surveying the scene, the spilled alcohol, the broken glass, Leona's tear-stained face. I see the hearing went as well as expected. Not now, Mom, Leona said, kneeling to pick up the glass shards. I warned you, Gloria continued, ignoring her daughter's plea. Didn't I warn you? Men like Silas, they're waiting for an excuse to show their true colors. You got sloppy, and now you're paying for it. The whole thing was recorded, Leona admitted, her voice hollow. Ava had her camera. She gave it to the judge. As if summoned by the thought, Leona's phone buzzed with an email notification. She read it, her face draining of color. They're putting me on administrative leave, she whispered. Effective immediately, pending a review of my conduct. Of course they are, Gloria said, her tone unsympathetic. You've become a liability. What am I going to do? She asked, the question directed at no one in particular. You're going to pull yourself together, Gloria said firmly. This isn't over. Men like Silas, they peak early. He thinks he's won, but he doesn't understand how to play the long game. Nico nodded in agreement, his earlier anger seemingly forgotten. Your mother's right. We regroup, find another angle. That video is bad, but it's not everything. There are still ways to make Silas look unfit. Tell me what to do, she said quietly. Across town, Silas sat at Cohen's kitchen table, laptop open before him. Ava was asleep in the garden apartment below, exhausted from the emotional strain of the day. You should have seen her face when that video played, he told Cohen, who was nursing a cup of coffee across from him. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. Fear makes people dangerous, Cohen replied, his military experience lending weight to the observation. Especially someone like Leona, who's never had to face consequences. Silas nodded, creating a new spreadsheet with methodical precision. That's why I'm documenting everything. Every call, every text, every interaction. And what about you? What do you need? The question caught Silas off guard. He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Justice, he said finally. Not revenge. Justice. I need the truth to matter. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. Leona again. This isn't over. You've poisoned my daughter against me. I'll never forgive that. Silas showed the message to Cohen, then added it to his documentation spreadsheet. See, he said quietly, still trying to flip the script, making herself the victim. Silas closed the laptop, suddenly weary. The adrenaline that had carried him through the day was ebbing, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion. I keep thinking about Ava, he admitted. How much of this she's absorbing. She shouldn't have had to be the one to expose Leona's lies. That should have been on me. Kids see more than we give them credit for, Cohen said. Ava's smart. She knew what she was doing with that recording. That's what worries me. She's 7. She shouldn't have to be this tactical. Cohen leaned forward, his expression serious. Listen to me. You're fighting for her future, for her sense of what's true and what's not. Don't second-guess yourself now. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of the garden apartment as Silas set a bowl of cereal in front of Ava. 2 weeks had passed since the courthouse revelation, and a new routine had begun to take shape in their lives. Dad, Ava said, pushing her spoon through the milk. When is Mom's next visit? Silas paused in making his coffee. Leona's supervised visits had become a source of tension. The court-appointed supervisor had reported that Leona spent much of the time questioning Ava about her living conditions with Silas, probing for anything that could be used against him. Tomorrow afternoon, he answered carefully. Are you looking forward to it? Ava shrugged, her small shoulders rising and falling in a gesture that looked too adult for her frame. I guess. She cries a lot now. You know that's not because of anything you did, right? She says it's because she misses me, Ava replied. But then she asks a lot of questions about you and our apartment and what we do. A familiar anger stirred in Silas's chest, but he kept his expression neutral. What kind of questions? If you ever get mad, if you say mean things about her, if I'm scared of you. Ava looked up, her dark eyes serious. I told her no. I told her you never say anything bad about her, even though she says bad things about you. Later that morning, after dropping Ava at school, Silas met with Mira at her office. The lawyer had news, and judging by her expression as he entered, it wasn't good. Leona's filed an emergency motion, Mira said without preamble, sliding a document across her desk. She's claiming the video was altered or taken out of context. She's demanding a forensic analysis. This is desperate, he said finally, setting the paper down. The judge saw the unedited footage. It speaks for itself. Desperate, yes, but potentially effective, Mira cautioned. It creates doubt, plants the idea that you might be manipulating Ava against her mother, which is exactly what Leona's been doing, Silas pointed out, frustration evident in his voice. Every supervised visit is an interrogation. I know, and we'll present that in our response. Mira leaned forward, her expression grave. But you need to be prepared, Silas. Leona will try to weaponize Ava again. She's lost the moral high ground, so she'll get dirtier, more desperate. That evening, after dinner, Silas sat with Ava in their small living room, a children's book about boundaries open between them. This is an important conversation, he began, about the things people might ask you to do or say that might make you uncomfortable. Ava listened intently as Silas explained, in age-appropriate terms, the concept of manipulation, how adults might try to get her to say things that weren't true, might try to make her feel responsible for their feelings, might ask her to keep secrets. You never have to lie for anyone, he emphasized. Not for me, not for Mom, not for anyone. And you never have to keep secrets that make you feel bad inside. Like the time Mom asked me not to tell you that Nico was at our house when you were on your work trip? Ava asked innocently. Silas felt a cold spike of anger, but kept his voice steady. Exactly like that. Those kinds of secrets aren't good secrets. He showed her the small voice recorder he'd purchased simple enough for a child to operate, disguised as a bracelet charm. If anyone ever asks you to do something that feels wrong, or tells you to keep secrets that make you worried, you can record it, he explained. Not to get them in trouble, but to protect yourself. As he taught her how to operate it, Silas felt a pang of regret that his daughter needed these lessons so young. But the alternative, leaving her vulnerable to Leona's manipulation, was unacceptable. The next day, as predicted, Judge Price dismissed Leona's emergency motion. The court-appointed technical expert confirmed the video's authenticity, finding no evidence of tampering or selective editing. But the victory was short-lived. 3 days later, Leona filed an amended custody petition with explosive new allegations that Silas was teaching Ava to spy on her, providing her with recording devices, and systematically alienating her from her mother. "She's grasping at straws," Mira reassured him during an emergency phone call. "But we need to address this head-on. Judge Price won't appreciate these tactics, but he has to take allegations seriously." "She's lying," Silas said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Again, I know, and we'll prove it." Mira paused. "But Silas, the recorder wasn't the best idea. I understand why you did it, but it plays into her narrative." The next day brought another twist. Judge Price ordered an emergency hearing on Leona's new allegations, but also did something unexpected. He subpoenaed the metadata from Leona's phone, the device that Ava had recorded with her camera. The technical evidence was damning. The timestamps and location data proved that the video was indeed recorded by Ava on Leona's phone during the time period in question. More importantly, it proved Leona had lied under oath about the circumstances surrounding the recording. In a scathing rebuke, Judge Price dismissed Leona's amended petition and issued a warning. "This court will not tolerate the filing of false allegations or the misrepresentation of evidence. Mrs. Merrick, you're treading dangerously close to perjury charges. Consider this your final warning." Outside the courthouse, Mira couldn't conceal her satisfaction. He all but called her a liar on the record. "This strengthens our position significantly." Silas nodded, but didn't share her enthusiasm. Each victory felt hollow when weighed against the cost to Ava. The custody battle was taking its toll on his daughter, who had grown quieter, more watchful with each passing week. "I just want this to be over," he admitted. "For Ava's sake." 3 more weeks until the final hearing, Mira reminded him. "Stay the course. Document everything. We're winning." The coffee shop sat on a quiet corner 2 blocks from Cohen's high school, its late afternoon clientele a mix of students and professionals. Gloria Vess looked distinctly out of place among them, her designer outfit and carefully maintained appearance drawing curious glances from the baristas. Cohen spotted her immediately upon entering, her rigid posture and calculating gaze unmistakable. Though he'd only met Leona's mother a handful of times over the years, her reputation preceded her. "Mrs. Vess," Cohen said, sliding into the chair across from her. "This is unexpected." Gloria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Maddox, thank you for meeting me." "You said it was important," Cohen replied, making no move to order a drink. "Though I have to say, I'm surprised you'd want to talk to me, given my friendship with Silas. That's precisely why I wanted to speak with you." Gloria leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I'm concerned about my granddaughter." Gloria reached into her designer handbag and withdrew an envelope. $20,000. Cash. No paper trail. Cohen didn't touch the envelope. "And what would I need to do for this generous gift?" "Simply tell the truth," Gloria replied smoothly. "About Silas's temper. About how you've witnessed him lose control. About your concerns for Ava's safety in his care." The audacity of it left Cohen momentarily speechless. When he found his voice, it was dangerously quiet. "You want me to lie under oath, to betray my oldest friend, to help take Ava away from the only stable parent she has. I want you to help a little girl have her mother in her life," Gloria countered. "Silas is punishing Leona through Ava. You know it's true." Cohen stood abruptly. "You've severely misjudged me, Mrs. Vess, and you've misjudged Silas. He doesn't have a temper. He has principles, something you clearly wouldn't recognize." He leaned down, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "If I were you, I'd be very careful about approaching witnesses with bribes. That's witness tampering, a felony. Last I checked." Across town, Ava sat in the sterile visitation room of the Family Services Center, a social worker observing discreetly from the corner. These supervised visits with Leona had become increasingly tense over the past few weeks, but today seemed different. Leona appeared distracted, checking her phone repeatedly. "Are you feeling okay, Mom?" Ava asked. Looking up from a board game they were half-heartedly playing, Leona's attention snapped back to her daughter. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just a lot on my mind." She reached across the table, taking Ava's small hand in hers. "You know I love you more than anything, right? That everything I do is for you." "Good," Leona continued, "because things are going to change soon. I promise you won't have to live in that tiny apartment much longer. We'll be together again in our real home." Before Ava could respond, the door opened. Nico stepped in, ignoring the social worker's immediate objection. "Sir, this is a closed visitation. You're not on the approved list," the social worker said, rising from her chair. "Just delivering something Leona forgot," Nico replied with a dismissive smile. He walked to the table, placing a small bag beside Leona. "Her medication. You need to leave immediately," the social worker insisted, moving toward the door to call for assistance. Nico turned to go, but not before leaning down to whisper something in Leona's ear. Ava couldn't hear the words, but she saw her mother's face change, a flicker of fear quickly masked. As Nico passed Ava's chair, he paused, his smile not reaching his eyes. "See you soon, kid." The threat wasn't spoken, but Ava felt it nonetheless. After Nico left, the visit continued in strained silence. Leona's earlier intensity replaced by a nervous distraction. When the visitation ended, Ava walked quickly to Mira, who was waiting to drive her home. Silas had arranged for his lawyer to handle pickups after visitations, wanting a legal witness to any potential issues. "How was it today?" Mira asked as they walked to her car. Ava hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Nico came. He wasn't supposed to be there. He said something to Mom that scared her." Myra's steps faltered. "Nico was at the visitation center? Inside the room?" Ava nodded. "He said he was bringing Mom's medicine, but she doesn't take medicine." The lawyer's expression hardened. "Did he say anything to you?" "He said, 'See you soon.'" Ava hugged herself, suddenly cold despite the warm day. "He looked angry, and Mom was acting weird, saying we'd be together in our real home soon. We need to file for a protective order immediately," Mira said without preamble when she called Silas. Nico violated the visitation restrictions, and from what Ava described, there was an implied threat. The next morning, Mira filed for an emergency protective order, citing Nico's unauthorized presence at the visitation and the implied threat toward Ava. Judge Price granted it immediately, suspending Leona's visitation rights pending a review hearing. The backlash was swift. Leona called Silas repeatedly, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails accusing him of fabricating the incident, of poisoning Ava against her, of orchestrating a conspiracy with the visitation center staff. But fate had other plans. 3 days after the protective order was issued, Nico was pulled over for running a red light less than a mile from Cohen's house. The routine traffic stop escalated when the officer noticed open alcohol containers in the vehicle. In the ensuing arrest, the officer discovered a handwritten map to Cohen's address in Nico's pocket. More alarming, when police visited Leona's home to question her about Nico's intentions, they found her with visible bruises on her arms and neck. Although she initially claimed they were from a fall, under separate questioning, she admitted Nico had become physically abusive in recent weeks, particularly after court setbacks. The custody case suddenly took on criminal dimensions. Protective orders were extended to include Silas and Cohen. Leona, now separated from Nico and apparently cooperating with police, was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation before any visitation with Ava could resume. As the final custody hearing approached, Silas received an unexpected call from Mira. "The prosecutor wants to speak with us," she said, her voice tense. They found something in Nico's phone records. Something about a plan involving Ava. Whatever else happened, whatever it cost him, Silas would protect his daughter. The final battle was coming, and he would not lose. The morning of the final custody hearing dawned clear and cold, an early autumn chill settling over the suburban Oregon landscape. Silas stood at the bathroom mirror, straightening his tie with steady hands that belied the storm of emotions within him. 11 weeks had passed since the night he discovered Leona's betrayal. The prosecutor's findings had been as disturbing as Mira had suggested text messages between Nico and Leona discussing a plan to take Ava across state lines if the custody hearing didn't go their way. "Dad," Ava's voice called from the kitchen. "Are you ready?" Uncle Cohen made breakfast. In the kitchen, Cohen was flipping pancakes while Ava carefully arranged berries on her plate in a meticulous pattern. This small ritual had become part of their routine on difficult days, creating order where she could, finding control in small things. "Are you nervous?" Ava asked suddenly, looking up at Silas with those perceptive eyes. Silas considered lying, then decided against it. Honesty had become their foundation. "A little, but being nervous is normal when something matters." "Will Mom be there?" "Yes," Silas replied carefully. "And you might need to talk to the judge again. But Mira and I will be there the whole time. You just need to tell the truth, like always." An hour later, they arrived at the courthouse. The courtroom was more crowded than for previous hearings. The case had attracted attention, partly due to Nico's arrest and the criminal charges that had spun off from the custody dispute. Judge Price entered, his presence commanding immediate silence. He acknowledged Silas with a slight nod before taking his seat, and then Leona appeared, entering from a side door with her attorney. Silas felt a jolt of surprise at her appearance. Gone was the polished, confident woman who had performed so convincingly at the first hearing. This Leona looked gaunt, her designer clothes hanging loosely on her frame, dark circles visible beneath expertly applied makeup. Their eyes met briefly across the courtroom. For a moment, Silas glimpsed something unexpected in her gaze, not the defiance or manipulation he'd come to expect, but something that looked remarkably like despair. The hearing began with opening statements. Leona's attorney went first, adopting a notably different approach from previous hearings. Gone were the aggressive accusations against Silas. Instead, he portrayed Leona as a mother who had made regrettable errors in judgment, while suffering from undiagnosed depression and anxiety, exacerbated by an emotionally abusive relationship with Nico Valles. Myra's opening statement was concise and devastating. "This case isn't about mistakes, Your Honor. It's about choices, repeated, deliberate choices to put personal gratification above parental responsibility, to manipulate a child, to plan false allegations of abuse. And when those plans were exposed, to consider fleeing with the child rather than face consequences." As evidence presentations began, Silas maintained his composure through the clinical recitation of Leona's betrayals, the affair, the videotape conversation about false allegations, the text messages planning to flee with Ava, the attempted witness tampering by Gloria Vess. When it was Silas's turn to testify, he spoke directly and honestly, neither embellishing nor minimizing the facts. "I don't take pleasure in any of this," he told the court. "I want to believe Leona could be the mother Ava deserves. But the evidence shows a pattern of putting her own desires above our daughter's well-being. I can forgive the affair. I can't forgive using Ava as a pawn." During cross-examination, Leona's attorney attempted to paint Silas as rigid and unforgiving, suggesting his unwillingness to consider reconciliation or more generous visitation demonstrated a desire for revenge rather than concern for Ava. "Mr. Merrick," the attorney asked, "isn't it true that you've refused all attempts at mediation? That you've maintained an inflexible position on custody from the beginning?" "I've refused mediation because the trust is irreparably broken," Silas replied evenly. "And my position has been consistent because the evidence has consistently shown that Leona cannot be trusted with Ava's well-being." "But people can change, can't they? Don't you believe in second chances?" Silas met the attorney's gaze steadily. "I believe in evidence. The evidence shows Leona was willing to make false abuse allegations against me, to coach our daughter to lie, and to flee with her rather than abide by court rulings. Those aren't mistakes. They're character revelations." When Leona took the stand, her testimony began as her attorney had framed it: contrite, emotional, emphasizing her therapy and newfound insights. But under Myra's cross-examination, cracks appeared in the performance. "Mrs. Merrick," Mira began, "you've testified that you've taken responsibility for your actions. Yet in your sworn statements, You continue to blame Mr. Merrick for driving you to infidelity. Which is it? Leona hesitated. I've made mistakes, but Silas isn't blameless. He was emotionally unavailable for years. So you haven't taken full responsibility, Mira clarified. You still believe your actions were partially justified. Let's discuss the video recorded by your daughter, Mira continued. You claimed under oath that it was taken out of context. The technical analysis proved otherwise. Were you lying then? Or are you lying now about taking responsibility? Leona's carefully constructed composure began to crumble. You don't understand. I was manipulated by Nico. I was afraid of losing Ava. So afraid that you planned to flee with her across state lines. I never would have actually done it. Leona's voice rose, her polished facade slipping. It was just talk. I was desperate. Desperate enough to allow your mother to attempt to bribe a witness. Mira pressed. Desperate enough to violate court orders by bringing Mr. Valles to supervised visitations. Leona looked toward the judge, her eyes filling with tears. Your Honor, please. I've lost everything: my job, my home, my reputation. Don't take my daughter too. I'm her mother. After a brief recess, the court reconvened for Ava's testimony. Silas watched with a mixture of pride and sorrow as his daughter walked to the modified witness area, looking small but determined in her blue dress. Hi, Ava, Judge Price said kindly. Do you remember me? Ava nodded. You're the judge. You make sure things are fair. Do you understand the difference between the truth and a lie? Yes, Ava replied. The truth is what really happened, even if it's hard to say. A lie is saying something different to get what you want or to not get in trouble. Can you tell me how things have been living with your dad these past weeks? Ava considered the question carefully. Good. Dad makes sure I get to school on time. We have dinner together every night. He helps me with homework, and we read before bed. While I'm sad about Mom, he says it's okay to feel sad, but that will be okay. And how do you feel when you visit with your mom? Ava's small shoulders tensed. Nervous. She asks a lot of questions about Dad, not about me. Sometimes she cries and says I don't love her anymore, which makes me feel bad. And she tells me things I'm not supposed to tell Dad, which feels like lying. What kind of things? That Dad turned me against her. That he stole me from her. That soon I'll live with her again and everything will be better. Ava looked directly at the judge. But I don't want to live with Mom. I want to stay with Dad. Can you tell me why, Ava? Because Dad never lies to me, she said simply. Mom told me to lie, but I didn't want to. The courtroom fell silent at the child's clear statement. Silas caught a glimpse of Leona, her face crumpling as she heard her daughter's words. When the court reconvened for closing arguments, the atmosphere had shifted. Even Leona's attorney seemed to sense that the case had slipped beyond recovery, his arguments focusing on requesting liberal visitation rather than shared custody. Judge Price took only 30 minutes to reach his decision. When he returned to the bench, his expression was grave. In matters of custody, this court's primary concern is the best interest of the child, he began. Having carefully reviewed all evidence and testimony, I find that Ava Merrick's best interest is served by placing her in the full legal and physical custody of her father, Silas Merrick. A small sound escaped Leona, part gasp, part sob. Silas remained still, absorbing the words he'd fought so hard to hear. Mrs. Merrick, the judge continued, the court finds your conduct throughout these proceedings deeply troubling. The evidence shows repeated attempts to manipulate both the child and the legal process. As such, your visitation rights will be suspended for a period of 6 months, during which time you will complete court-mandated therapy and parenting classes. After that period, supervised visitation may be reinstated at the discretion of the court. He looked directly at Leona. Let me be absolutely clear. This ruling is not a punishment. It is a consequence of your own actions and a necessary measure to protect your daughter while you address the issues that led to those actions. How much of a relationship you ultimately have with Ava will depend entirely on your commitment to genuine change, not performance or manipulation. As the judge continued outlining the specifics of the custody arrangement, Silas felt something unexpected, not triumph, but a profound sadness for what could have been, for the family that had shattered. For Ava, who would grow up with the memory of this courtroom, these testimonies, these revelations about her mother. But beneath the sadness was a steady certainty. He had protected his daughter. He had stood for truth when it would have been easier to compromise. Whatever came next, that would be his foundation. The courthouse steps teemed with activity as Silas emerged into the afternoon sunlight, Ava's hand firmly in his. Mira walked beside them, fielding questions from reporters who had gathered after word of the verdict spread. "Mr. Merrick has no statement at this time," Mira repeated firmly. "His priority now is providing stability for his daughter." Ava pressed closer to his side, her small face half hidden against his suit jacket. The attention clearly made her uncomfortable. "Almost done. Cohen's waiting in the car. Then we can go home." As they neared the bottom of the steps, a commotion erupted behind them. Leona's voice, raw with emotion, called out, "Silas, wait." He hesitated, then turned slowly, keeping Ava partially behind him. Leona stood halfway down the steps, her attorney attempting to guide her toward a side exit, away from the press. She shook off his restraining hand, her eyes fixed on Silas and Ava. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Just 1 minute. Take Ava to the car," Silas told Mira quietly. "I'll be right there." Up close, the changes in her were even more apparent. The confident, polished woman he'd married had been replaced by someone hollowed out, diminished. "You did it," she said, attempting a smile that faltered immediately. "You took everything. That's not what happened, and you know it," Silas replied evenly. "You gambled everything and lost. There's a difference." "I wasn't myself," she insisted, lowering her voice as she glanced at the hovering reporters. "You have to believe me. Nico, my mother, they pushed me toward things I never would have done otherwise." "You're still doing it," Silas observed, a trace of weariness entering his voice. "Still blaming everyone but yourself. Still looking for the angle, the performance that will get you what you want. That's not fair." Tears welled in her eyes, real ones this time, not the calculated displays she'd mastered over the years. "I love Ava. Whatever else I did wrong, I love my daughter." "I believe you do," Silas acknowledged. "In your way. But love isn't enough, Leona. Not when it comes with manipulation and lies. Not when it teaches a child that truth is negotiable." "Please," she whispered, reaching for his arm. "I'll do the therapy. I'll take the classes. Just don't cut me out of her life completely. I'm still her mother." Silas stepped back from her touch. The judge's ruling was clear. After 6 months, supervised visitation can resume if you've met the requirements. "That's not me cutting you out, that's you earning back what you lost." "And you?" Leona asked, a flash of the old defiance returning. "Will you forgive me then? Will that be enough for the great, principled Silas Merrick?" Silas looked at her for a long moment, seeing behind her anger to the fundamental insecurity that had always driven her, the need for validation, for control, for victory, even in defeat. "No," he said finally. "I won't forgive you. Not for the affair, not for the lies, not even for dragging our daughter into this. But I will co-parent with you if you prove you can put Ava's needs above your own. That's the best I can offer." Something in Leona's expression crumbled at his words, as if she'd been holding on to some fantasy of eventual reconciliation despite everything. "You never loved me," she accused, her voice hardening. "Not really. If you had, you could forgive." "I love the person I thought you were," Silas corrected her. "That person doesn't exist. Maybe never did." He turned to go, then paused, looking back at her one last time. "Get help, Leona. Real help, not just what looks good to the court. For Ava's sake, if not your own." As he walked away, Leona called after him, "She's still my daughter too. You can't erase me." Silas didn't turn around. The time for arguments, for emotional appeals, for drama was over. Whatever relationship Leona would have with Ava going forward would be built on actions, not words. On truth, not performance. 3 months after the final custody hearing, Silas stood in the backyard of their new home, watching as Ava chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. October had painted the surrounding trees in rich golds and deep reds, a fitting backdrop for this new chapter in their lives. The modest 3-bedroom house sat on a quiet street just 10 minutes from Ava's school, with a backyard bordered by mature trees. Life had settled into a new rhythm. Silas had adjusted his work schedule to be home when Ava returned from school. Weekends were filled with hiking, library visits, and simple domestic routines that provided the stability Ava craved. Leona remained on the periphery of their lives, a name that appeared less frequently in conversation, a shadow that had receded but never fully vanished. According to Mira, she was complying with the court's requirements, attending therapy and parenting classes with apparent sincerity. In 3 more months, supervised visitation would be considered. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway disrupted Silas's thoughts. Cohen emerged moments later, carrying a 6-pack of beer and a small paper bag that undoubtedly contained the chocolate croissants Ava had become obsessed with from the bakery near his school. Uncle Cohen. Ava abandoned her firefly hunt, racing across the lawn to greet him as Ava excitedly peeked into the bag. Another car pulled into the driveway. Mira stepped out, looking distinctly more casual than her courtroom persona in jeans and a light sweater. These Friday gatherings had become something of a tradition in recent weeks, a celebration of their shared victory, a reinforcement of the bonds forged in adversity, as they settled on the back patio. Ava running inside to get cups of the lemonade Silas had made earlier, Myra's expression grew more serious. "I have news," she said quietly. Leona's moved out of state, Oregon to Washington. Silas absorbed this information, turning the beer bottle slowly in his hands. "For good." Mira nodded. "Her attorney filed the paperwork yesterday. She's requested that future supervised visitations, when resumed, be conducted via video call until she's established in her new location." "She's running," Cohen observed, his voice neutral but his meaning clear. "Most likely," Mira agreed. "The community here knows too much. Her reputation is damaged beyond repair." And with Gloria refusing to support her financially after the failed custody battle, Silas remained silent, processing the implications. Part of him felt relief distance would make it harder for Leona to insert chaos into their lives. But another part recognized what this would mean for Ava, who, despite everything, still occasionally asked about her mother. "She's running from accountability," Silas said, a familiar anger stirring beneath his calm exterior. "Again, people like Leona," Cohen said quietly, "they don't change fundamentally. They just find new stages for the same performance." Inside, they could hear Ava humming to herself as she gathered cups and napkins, blissfully unaware of the adult conversation on the patio. Later, after Ava had fallen asleep on the couch halfway through the movie and been carried to bed, the 3 adults returned to the patio. The night had turned cool, stars visible above the tree line, a peaceful conclusion to a day that had brought unsettling news. "How will you tell her?" Mira asked, breaking the contemplative silence. Silas sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Honestly, that's all I can do. That her mother has moved and that it might change how they communicate, but not that she's moved on from Ava. Even though that's exactly what she's done," Cohen pointed out. "Ava doesn't need to carry that burden," Silas replied firmly. "She'll figure out on her own eventually. Kids always do. But she deserves the chance to come to that understanding in her own time." Mira studied him thoughtfully. "You know, after everything Leona put you through, most men would be celebrating her departure, taking it as a final victory." "It's not about winning," Silas said, gazing up at the stars. "It never was. It was about protecting Ava from lies, including the lie that her mother doesn't love her. That's a different kind of harm." They fell silent again, each lost in their own thoughts. The quiet was comfortable, born of shared battles and mutual respect. "She tried to burn everything down," Silas said finally, his voice steady in the darkness. "All she did was light my path." The words hung in the night air, a distillation of the journey from betrayal to reconstruction. Not a journey of forgiveness, Silas had meant what he told Leona on the courthouse steps. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. But something else had emerged from the ashes of his former life. Clarity, purpose, a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. As Cohen and Mira eventually departed, Silas checked on Ava one final time before retiring. She slept peacefully, her favorite stuffed bear tucked under one arm, her small face relaxed in sleep. In that moment, looking at his daughter, Silas felt a profound certainty that they would be all right, not because the path ahead was easy, but because they would walk it together, with truth as their compass. The divorce, the custody battle, Leona's betrayal, all of it had shaped them, but it wouldn't define them. What would define them was what came next. The quiet, daily acts of love and stability, the honest conversations, the unwavering commitment to truth even when it hurt. Outside, the last fireflies of the season blinked in the yard, small beacons in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, including the difficult conversation about Leona's departure. But tonight, in this moment of hard-won peace, Silas allowed himself to feel, if not happiness exactly, then its quieter cousin, contentment. The truth had prevailed. Not easily, not painlessly, but finally. And in that truth, however difficult, they had found their way forward.